Welcome to the latest episode of the Wealth Mosaic in Conversation. In this episode, our founder Stephen Wall is in conversation with Anthony Montufar, Chief Digital and Client Experience Officer at Equitable Advisors. Stephen and Anthony discuss driving access to financial advice, bringing clients in on technological transformations, and Anthony's predictions for how the US wealth market is set to change in the years to come.
Welcome to another episode of the Wealth Mosaic in Conversation. I am joined by Anthony Montufar from Equitable Advisors. Anthony, thanks for joining us.
Yeah, thanks for having me here, Stephen. Really looking forward to the conversation with you.
Great. Well, I should have referenced your full title because it'll give a context of what we're going to talk about a bit today. So, Chief Digital and Client Experience Officer at Equitable. Anthony, can you tell us a little bit about your background, your sort of career to date? A little bit about yourself and how you've got to where you are in the wealth management industry today.
Yeah, definitely, and a great question. One that I enjoy talking about more so because of the fact that it's always been about for me, how you do things. And while yes, we always say we're kind of graded on what we do and what we deliver, it's more so, especially in our business, we know it's a relationship-based business, and that's what's important. So, I've spent my entire career pretty much in this same space, Stephen, across different firms. Really, prior to moving over to Equitable Advisors about 6 months ago, my entire career was always in sales and marketing, advisor platform, client experience, across different wirehouses. I would say even prior to that, I spent time in various roles or in various positions. I would say really, again, kind of supporting that same general initiative around how do we utilize the tools, the processes, the people that we have at our disposal to really assist clients, or really assist people, I should say, with really making the most of their lives as they move forward.
What can you tell us about Equitable? What does the firm look like in terms of its size, its profile, its product and service offering, people, market positioning? Who is Equitable Advisors?
Yeah, definitely. And so, as I alluded to, I've spent my entire career prior to coming over here, and what I joke about and say kind of switching the jersey color, which I really love the colors that we have kind of going on here. But what is Equitable Advisors? To me, it's really, and this is how we kind of look forward and continue to make progress on the overarching vision. It really is a wealth management partner that understands the future, but also has the back of each of the individuals and the people, the teams, and also the clients that are there. So when we think about this firm and this practice, and one of the things that really excites me every day coming to work is we have a plethora of different resources, whether it's marketing, of course, innovation through technology, people, different platforms, different affiliation models. All of those different things are really what allow us to really take that next step forward and have advisors who ultimately lead with insight and guide with empathy. And ultimately what we do is, while we always say what every firm does is slightly, the variations are only slightly different, it's truly about not just the numbers, not just the facts, not just the investments, but really the values, the life stories behind the people that ultimately accompany them, and ensuring that we can help individuals secure financial well-being for the future to keep life going strong, successfully, and really understand what they've built and how to get to the next step. One of the things I say and I really enjoy about this firm, and truthfully, that an element that enticed me to come here, there are many different elements, but is really the variations of advisor segments that we support. So all in, roughly 4,600 advisors. And that's across different segments, right? We say, we do a really, really good job of developing young talent coming, right into the business or breaking into the business, all the way through what we consider, our experienced advisors that have aspirations of succession planning, selling their business. Of course, we have different elements in there of saying, I want to grow my team. I want to start a team or think about joining a team. And so all those different elements are segments and individual elements that we have on our platform, and everything really starts and kind of continues forward from a planning perspective, right? We feel really, really strongly about a holistic life approach to how do I make sure, that the last couple of years set me up for the next future years, or even further down the road from there, and really becoming that trusted financial advisor that that you believe in, that you want to call at any segment of your life, not just about the numbers. So that's a little bit about Equitable Advisors.
Great. Sounds like the marketing team have been busy because I think you said leading with insights, guiding with empathy. So you've got some nice strap lines to guide how the firm works with its clients. You also referenced several different types of segment. So you can tell us a little bit about what kind of clients you deal with and which segments they sit in.
Yeah, definitely. So even before I kind of get into that, one of the things that we consistently boast on is our platform. And our platform is truly built around support independence. So what does that really mean, right? I think a lot of people have this model. And like I said, especially for someone like me, very familiar with the W-2 channel. That's where I kind of grew up. But then ultimately, as you progress as an advisor or an advisor team, right, you have different needs and so do your clients. And so our platform and our model around support independence really says, you're not alone. We're here for you. We're able to give you the resources, the thought leadership, the people management to ultimately continue to allow an advisor team either or an individual producer of saying, hey, we know what you need and we can support you to get there. And then as you quickly kind of, you think about that model, that really boasts our client segment, right? So there's no client that effectively is too small or too big for the firm or for any of our practices. We consistently say that it's all about identifying, recognizing, what is the approach that you want? How do we help you as a client from a financial planning or really a life planning perspective to get you to that next step? It always starts, with listening. Of course, there's this element of how do I ensure what I want to touch, what I want to feel, allows me to get to that next step. But a lot of it always is grounded in the personalization of what I need, because we always say, right, there's no element of, great, just put this product on the table and see who picks it up. Every client is different. Every team is different. Every family is different. And so allowing those customizations to fit the mix, whether it's around tax strategy, retirement planning, estate planning, anything under the sun, that's, really where we continue to say that's where we spend all of our time, effort, and energy on.
So it sounds very much that there's a sort of central strategic direction, a toolkit, if you will, that sits in the middle of the firm that advisors can drop into as they require based on their needs, their client preferences, and so on and so forth.
Yeah, that's right. That's exactly right. I think, one of the things that's really important, especially in a model, like ours, where, you allow the firms and the practices to continue to grow and expand and contract. And really, we even help a lot of the practices say, great, we want to include another team or maybe a producer group to make our practice, our business bigger or potentially smaller, again, depending on what segment you're ultimately in. But all of it, and a lot of it, I should say, is grounded around what are the resources that you have at your disposal, whether it's strategic marketing partners, whether it's technology and digital innovation, whether it's understanding new products. We offer an open architecture platform here, and that's not always something that everybody is fully equipped to learn and understand. But bringing the resources on to say, great, take you to that next level, depending on where you want to go, and you as the advisor are really in the driver's seat. That's what allows us to, kind of take them and guide them through a different course, depending on what they need.
How does the firm drive access to financial advice and support diverse client needs? I mean, is there a sort of strategic approach to this?
Yeah, I think there is, and I think this is how we think about a lot of different things in our elements of how do I provide that holistic approach to wealth management, right? To us, it always starts with this goals-based planning or this goals-based approach, right? Who are you? What matters to you? What do you need to get there? And by the way, what are the things that maybe you don't need to be doing or don't need to be accessing? But it's really about that client and what their story is. What are the values that they have? And what we always say, right, is what are you planning for? What comes next? What comes in 2 years, in 5 years, in 20 years? And understanding how to ultimately get you there. That element to me is one of the bigger aspects, because I think a lot of different firms, a lot of different advisors across the street, will say, yes, we utilize this type of a planning approach or this type of a goals-based practice. But really, it's that ongoing review, that kind of follow-up process of saying, hey, Stephen, maybe for you, it's every 6 months. But for somebody else who's newer to the industry or maybe newer to the business, it has to be every 2 months. And we have to reallocate or reutilize or redeploy maybe even resources on saying what fits you, where are you heading, and how did what we talked about last time or maybe yesterday slightly changed. So I think all of that is really important to say, how do we ensure that your plan consistently stays aligned and it's focused and directed in the right space to make sure that you're ready for whatever life brings at you next.
So in that sort of spirit of flexibility, what can you tell us about the sort of platform side? So, does the firm have a sort of strategic view to its tech stack? Is there a sort of background to how it's tackling and developing what it's doing now, whether that's a background that includes struggle or opportunity?
Yeah, definitely. So, a lot of what I think about is, we talked about support independence and really ensuring that we provide this optionality or flexibility. But I think there's also it's a key part of what we do, and really how I've been looking at this kind of going forward is that yes, you have to. Again, we have firms that grow, that shrink, that collapse, that expand, and that type of flexibility is important to say at any point in time. The platform suits you. Right. But at the same time, I think there's elements, we often joke about this concept that, especially in today's day and age, where you can spin up a platform or spin up a business in a couple of hours. Too much is too much. And so what does that really mean? Everybody kind of has your core niche, your core element of tools. And for us, it's a couple different things rooted really in deep financial planning, advisor productivity, and really providing the capability to reach and to touch and to engage clients, right? When you think about everything that we do, it covers those elements. And so really going deep into each one of those and having these integrations or seamless journeys across the platform is something that's key and important to me. While I also say, you'll have advisors and he'll have clients who have specific needs. And so you do need to have the ability to kind of plug in and plug and play and move different pieces across the chessboard at different points in the journey.
To what extent is that sort of centrally directed as opposed to you go out into the field and understand feedback from the advisors and even the clients and to shape a picture? I mean, in my sort of strategy days, if you will, right, you'd go in, you think, oh, client experience, it must be absolutely fantastic. You must speak to your clients all the time. Oh, no, we never speak to our clients. And, we just determine everything centrally. I'm imagining in today's world, it's a bit more of a mix, right? You've got to engage with your constituents to feel and understand what they want in order to deliver a central tech stack.
Yeah, that's right. So I said this, and it's funny, kind of many months before I joined here, as I was having conversations with the leadership team, and truthfully speaking, Dave Carr, my boss, he mentioned this element of the different advisor cohorts. We feel really strongly about them here. One's the NAF, one's our Honor Guard, and one's our Elite Advisor group. And so I would be remiss to say that, not every firm has groups like this. They're effectively, kind of your advocates, your field advocates. Yeah. And that's true. And I'm sure, Stephen, you hear this all the time. I think the difference, and this is really, I would say this even more at a macro level, the difference with these groups and the difference in how we do business here at Equitable Advisors is all about the people and that engagement model, right? So whether it's, the broker dealer committee or it's the digital innovation committee or the marketing committee, it's really about those individuals who put the time, effort, and energy to work with us, to work with the home office, my teams, to effectively prioritize and to dig into, anything that could be a really big topic or item, or really maybe something that's a little bit smaller. But having that constant engagement model and feedback loop makes all the difference, because that's ultimately how we win. I'd say the other element too, to your point, Stephen, is, and I joked about this, I think early on in the summer, or at the beginning of the summer, I should say, that feedback from the clients does really matter too, right? We always have this, what we consider always on feedback. And so most of the time, we joke about this and we say, if a client's going into a feedback channel, it's probably because something didn't go right. We think about ourselves, right? If we go to a restaurant or consumer goods, let's say Amazon, typically the time that we leave feedback is when something doesn't go well. I think of that and I think of it slightly differently. And I say, well, there was a reason that the client wanted to give feedback one way or another. If the client had a really good experience, he or she would be inclined to write a level of feedback, even if it's a quick email just to an advisor, to their support staff, on saying, I had a really good experience with moving my 401k check, because we all know that process is super seamless everywhere. Those are the type of things that, I think mean a lot to us and mean a lot to me as we continue to build this out and really balance all the different things that are on the table together.
So given your role, Anthony, or the title, Chief Digital and Client Experience Officer, is this a new role that was brought into the organization? And can you tell us a little bit about what the remit is, what the background to it is, what you're tasked with delivering for the firm?
Yeah, definitely. So yes, it is a newer role that the team thought that was as the day and age continues to evolve. And again, we all see this, I would say, in our world. It's really important to stay rooted, to stay grounded, and to stay really, what I say is ear to the ground on everything that's happening across the industry. And so obviously, I would say when we think about my team and my role, it's all around saying we are continuing to grow this business. It's continuing to flourish. And I think we've seen that very clearly. But how do we make sure that we're future proofing ourselves? We're thinking about what happens, 2 months from now, 5 months from now, or even, a year and 2, 3 years after that. Not only in the fact of how do we continue to grow the business from a model perspective or from a product offering perspective, but how do we ensure that we create frictionless environment? How do we create a space that continues to be super easy to do business with, right? It's something that we feel strongly about. And as I continue to collect, the different elements on our platform, those are all key attributes or key elements and goals of mine. And so my team, collectively manages and leads all of the advisor platforms. So all the tools that we utilize, that the field utilizes on a day-to-day to do business, to engage with their clients, as well as the client experience itself, right? Because there are different things that go into play when a client feels and is delivered our services or our products or whatever it may be that allows them to say, yes, I had a great experience with Johnny Smith from Equitable Advisors. And so those two elements really go hand in hand. Again, you take it from the advisor platform, ultimately leading into that client journey. And so that's, where we spend the most of our time on a day-to-day basis.
Can you tell us a little bit about, or anything about, any investments you've made, third-party technology you've acquired, or sort of problems that you've identified where you want to apply tech to empower advisors and enhance client outcomes? Is there some detail you can provide to where you've been focusing?
Yeah, definitely. So I think, all of perhaps 20 minutes in and we haven't yet referenced AI. So I think now is probably the right time to do that. And so I feel really strongly about AI moving forward, and something that perhaps, I know, Stephen, you've seen it, and others, we built out a strategic partnership with Jump and announced that a couple weeks ago. And it's not so much because of the fact that, yes, Jump does a great job with all of the offerings that they have on the table, but really it's taking a step back from, what they provide, but really how they think about what they're doing. And that was what really resonated with me and with members of the leadership team at Jump. And we want to continue to say, great, we're going to develop new capabilities, customized solutions, all really rooted in kind of their core competencies around meet, grow, and operate. But it's truly about how does it work for an equitable advisor, right? I think everybody has these optionality or this capability, to your point, Stephen, about third-party technology, but it's how you integrate it, it's how you utilize it, it's how you customize it. And that is to me what makes all the difference. I'd say the other element too is we have a couple of other key tools on the platform, whether it's our end-to-end product offering, which we utilize to do portfolio management, as well as our marketing and engagement platforms. These are all things that we feel that as we continue to build them out and we continue to leverage third-party capabilities joined with in-house offerings, that's really what's going to be kind of that differentiator or that element, that change element to us.
You referenced third party versus in-house. How do you decide which one to deploy?
Yeah, I think that's the constant evolution or the constant conversation, I would say, which I always say I fully welcome. I think it's really about not so much the technology, because again, I've been in this game long enough as of many of us to really say what was important maybe a year ago or 10 years ago is almost the same thing actually that's important today and tomorrow. It just kind of the colors are slightly different or the terminology is slightly different. And if you zoom out on that, it's really about, great, how does this technology, whether in-house or third party, how does it help my advisors be more productive, be more engaged, be more the person that every client wants to talk to when something goes well, or by the way, when something doesn't go well. And so I think that's really the debate, and less so about what does it cost or who has the the newest tech or the newest function. but it's about how does it work for me, right? I don't think that we truly have, the collectively, I should say, have solved that just yet. And so it's really about what process are we trying to put in play? Does it even need to be in play? Sometimes, we spend a lot of time, and again, this is the collectively trying to solve a problem. Oftentimes it does result back into some technology, some tool, or some digital capability. But we often miss that question of why are we solving this problem, or what is it doing for us? And when I say us, that can mean the client, the advisor, and really that's what it's all about for me. It's saying what creates a better day-to-day process, what creates more flexibility, more scalability, and how do we continue to move the ball down the field and ultimately punch it in into the end zone, and then by the way, turn right back around and keep going up the field. So to me, that it's those conversations that I welcome and that I think are super important to be thinking about as we move forward.
Do you have a sense of any of the impact of these technological investments in terms of whether it's pure return on investment financially or whether it's an enhanced client experience? Is there anything you can cite that says, yep, we did X and the return was Y?
Yeah, definitely. And I think actually, I'll answer that question, Stephen, in a slightly different fashion. I will come back to kind of the exact one, but I think this is another key element that is often missed and is a big miss, right? We say, great, sometimes and oftentimes, right, just turning something on or building something new and deploying it, that's not success, right? Ultimately, success is saying, great, what did it show you? What did it enhance? Or perhaps what did it elevate or highlight that you didn't see before? And so that's a mindset that I've been very impactful. I would say has been very impactful, and I've been very practical about throughout my career. Because ultimately, if you're just putting stuff out into the ether, it's great, and things are available. But if it's not actually moving something forward, like I said, if you're not actually putting points on the scoreboard, then why does it really matter? And so I use an example, or I will use an example, I should say, around a platform that we've kind of rolled out here in the last couple of months that effectively enables advisors to see more about their business. Again, I think some of the simple elements in this industry that have been true for the last 20, 30 years will still continue to be true moving forward. And so it's all about, yes, you have deep-rooted relationships and conversations and details with clients, but as you scale that out, and especially from a producer group standpoint or a larger team standpoint, you say, where are the commonalities? Where are the elements, where we could highlight or find information for a client that maybe, we spoke about previously, but we didn't necessarily come back to because there are a plethora of different things that are happening. And so I think this is a key element, again, kind of rooted in ultimately how do you plan for success, but ultimately how do you execute that strategy? And I think those working together and some of the tools that we put in place to enable that are really where we will see continued investment as we move forward.
Did we get into detail about how you're deploying AI, particularly in sort of the advice space? Is that something you can touch on?
Yeah, definitely. So I think, there's a lot of AI rolling around the ecosystem. I think we all know that. And it's actually funny. I joke about this sometimes and I say, it feels like AI has really just become a synonym for automation in today's day and age. And there's some cohorts around the marketplace that utilize that word in that way. But I would say I'll digress for now. But really, when I think about really market innovation from an advice standpoint and how do we leverage AI to enable that, it really comes back down to what does the client need and what is the advisor doing to help us get there? How do we make them they, as in the advisor, become more productive, more present, and really elevate both levels of IQ and EQ to us here at Equitable Advisors? That's a huge element, right? I've said it, in the past, that while AI, I feel very strongly, is not going to take the job of advisors, what it surely will do is say that advisors that are utilizing AI in an effective way will far supersede and far outpace the advisors who are not. And so some of the tools that we've kind of created, and even some tools that are still in the lab or still in the work, Stephen, are all doing that, right? It's saying, how do I produce the stronger human element utilizing AI to provide an offering, to provide a capability or a functionality that ultimately, back to my previous point, really makes a process more seamless for a client or allows me to potentially reach a client in a different way that I hadn't reached them, in the past.
You've spoken a lot about themes that broadly could be applied across other firms in the industry: advisor enablement, client experience, the adoption of AI, integration of technology, and personalizing tech to suit your specific requirements. Anthony, when you look generally across the US wealth industry, not tech specific, but trend specific, what are the things that you see that are kind of impacting the sector, driving change, shaping how it's going to look in the next 1, 2, 3 years' time? Where do you see the biggest elements of change?
Yeah, definitely. I'll say again, we've spent some time on it. So obviously AI, and really again, whether it's AI or technology, we've known this to be a disruptor in our industry since inception. The biggest thing now is that it grows exponentially, where something before might have taken 12 months to create, from thought to deployment. Whereas in today's world, that could take 12 hours, right? So I think that, is obviously one that needs to be on the table, and it's an important part to keep an eye on and really continue to fold into the practices. But I'll kind of hit on two other elements that are kind of overarching to that. I've mentioned it a couple times here, but really this idea of advisor development. So at Equitable Advisors, we have a couple of different key programs, whether it's our holistic life planning or our Columbia cohorts, but really these elements of not only breaking into the business, but continuing to grow your practice, to join other firms, or to develop one another as the ecosystem evolves. If you think about everything that we do, it's all rooted in that, right? What matters today still will matter tomorrow, but how do we effectively plan for that, both from an advisor standpoint, which then effectively leads into our client standpoint? The next key element is all coming down to differentiator, right? And really that ability to have personalized touches, to have personalized advice with the client. With all of the advancements in tools and technology in today's world, it's not so much like before. It used to be, well, great, my firm, whether I'm an RIA or a large broker dealer or a wirehouse, can afford ABC platform, and so that gives me the differentiator. That's not the conversation anymore, right? The conversation really is, how do I leverage it? How do I utilize it? But also, how do I create this capability that clients are coming to expect? I think this element of this investor experience, or really investor knowledge, that margin used to be really big before, between, we say, hey, what is it, let's say a 30-year seasoned advisor understand how can he produce and protect his clients, who maybe have never really been in this space. Let's say it's a client who has been in a completely different industry, but as time goes on, and again, the consumer tools, consumer needs, the network, the news continue to evolve, that gap is closing, right? There is so much more out there that really, I think now the conversation is, how do I filter out all of the noise and the information? And so to me, that's the element where the advisor's knowledge, the advisor's really capability to his or her clients makes all the difference.
So there's a significant speed of change issue in terms of what technology can deliver and bringing things to market. There's also the advisor enablement and training piece. Are you able to make any predictions in terms of what we'll see in terms of wealth management in the US over the next 2 to 3 years? I mean, enhanced M&A, firms leaving the market, broader product set, new client segments. Is there something that you feel is coming down the line because of everything that's happening around the sector today?
Yeah. I think you hit on a lot of them, to be honest, Stephen, and I agree with a lot of those kind of elements. But I'll say, one of the things for us, and maybe even more selfishly for me, is really all around this element of no client is at a time in their life where they're too big, too small, too complex, or perhaps too out of the loop. Oftentimes, I was actually speaking to an advisor not too long ago, a couple of weeks back, who said, a client, over their 70s came to me, and it was the first time that they started thinking about, how do I manage my money and manage my future? I think for a lot of people, just that conversation would be one of worry, but not so much. And so when we kind of go back to the thought, or maybe the question around that prediction, it truly is all around, how do the different firms that exist in the ecosystem, again, whether it's a small firm, a big practice, how do they coexist, and how do they support different elements of that client's journey? Because ultimately, right, without the clients, no matter what tools, no matter what processes, no matter what people we have, if we're not really helping a client achieve or really identify maybe some of their hopes, worries, and dreams, there's not much that's happening. And so I think it really does become this element around how do they coexist? How do we all coexist? How do we ensure that, yes, we'll obviously always collectively be, sort of counterparts across the space, but really there's an element of, there's tons of clients, there's tons of hopes, there's tons of worries, and there's tons of needs out there. And so how do we each, find that right spot and continue to develop it further and further?
I think it's an industry conundrum wherever you look in the world in terms of how wealth management firms and the ecosystem positions to engage and service clients. And the world is only becoming more complex, right, in terms of people's needs and expectations and the providers out there and the capabilities they offer in order to solve them. So, Anthony, thank you for the time. Great to speak to you. Thanks again. And we look forward to seeing you at our event in November.
Thank you so much, Stephen. I really appreciate you having me and look forward to connecting as we move forward.
Thank you for joining us once again for the Wealth Mosaic in Conversation. If you're enjoying the podcast, please subscribe so you never miss an episode. Please also leave a rating and a review for the podcast and share this episode with your colleagues, contacts and friends. If you'd like to be featured on the podcast, email Stephen Wall at stephen@thewealthmosaic.com. See you next week for more conversations.